February 1945. Deep in the German heartland, a bat-shaped aircraft unlike anything the world had ever seen lifts off from a frozen airfield. It has no tail, no fuselage, just a sweeping, graceful wing cutting through the winter sky at nearly 600 miles per hour. To the Allied forces closing in from every direction, this machine represents something terrifying. Technology decades ahead of its time. Within weeks, its only flying prototype will crash, its designer will flee to South America, and its secrets will spark a race between superpowers that continues to this day. This is the story of Hitler's so-called stealth fighter, the Horten Ho 229, and what happened to it after the war ended. The Horten brothers were not typical aircraft designers. Walter and Reimar Horten grew up in Bonn during the 1920s, when the Treaty of Versailles forbade Germany from building military aircraft. But the treaty said nothing about gliders. Across the defeated nation, aviation clubs sprang up, teaching young Germans to fly in engineless craft that drifted silently on the wind. The Horten brothers joined the Bonn Glider Club in 1925, when Walter was just 12 years old and Reimar was 10. Within a few years they had moved beyond flying other people's designs. They began building their own. What made the Hortens different was their obsession with a radical idea: the flying wing. Most aircraft of the era followed a familiar pattern: a fuselage in the center, wings on either side, a tail at the back for stability. But the Hortens believed all of that was unnecessary weight and drag. They imagined an aircraft that was nothing but wing, a single, sweeping surface that generated lift across its entire body. No tail, no protruding cockpit, just pure, efficient aerodynamics. Their early gliders looked like something from science fiction: sleek, tailless craft in which the pilot lay prone, stretched out inside the wing itself. The German aviation establishment dismissed them as hobbyists, building impractical curiosities. The Hortens had no formal engineering training. They lacked access to wind tunnels. They built their prototypes in their parents' house, testing theories by actually flying in them. It was dangerous work, and more than once they nearly killed themselves. But by the late 1930s, they had developed flying wings that outperformed conventional gliders in both speed and range. When war came, Walter Horten joined the Luftwaffe as a fighter pilot. He flew Messerschmitt Bf-109s during the Battle of Britain, serving as wingman to the legendary ace Adolf Galland. He scored 7 kills over England, but he also watched his squadron suffer devastating losses. The Bf-109 was a superb fighter, but its range was limited. German pilots would cross the English Channel, engage British Spitfires for a few desperate minutes, then have to turn back before their fuel ran out. Many never made it home. Walter became convinced that Germany needed a new kind of fighter. Something faster, something with longer range, something that could strike deep into enemy territory and return safely. And he believed his brother's flying wing design was the answer. By 1943, the situation had grown desperate. Allied bombers were pounding German cities day and night. The Luftwaffe needed interceptors that could climb fast enough to reach the bomber formations before they dropped their payloads. Hermann Göring, the Luftwaffe chief, issued what became known as the 3x1000 requirement. He wanted an aircraft that could carry 1,000 kilograms of bombs, travel 1,000 kilometers at 1,000 kilometers per hour. No propeller-driven aircraft could achieve such speed. Only the new turbojet engines being developed in Germany could reach those velocities. But jet engines burned through fuel at an alarming rate. Meeting the range requirement seemed impossible. The Horten brothers believed they had the solution. Their flying wing design was so aerodynamically efficient that it would need less engine power to maintain high speeds and therefore consume less fuel. In September 1943, they presented their concept to Goering himself at his Karenhall estate. The Reichsmarshal was impressed. He allocated 500,000 Reichsmarks to the project and demanded results within 6 months. Construction began almost immediately. The first prototype, designated H9V1, was an unpowered glider meant to test the basic airframe. It flew for the first time on March 1, 1944, piloted by Heinz Scheidhauer. The results were promising. The flying wing handled well, though it displayed the lateral instability that had always plagued tailless designs. A slight tendency to yaw from side to side, what pilots called Dutch roll. But the Hortens pressed on. The second prototype, the H9V2, was the one that mattered. This was the jet-powered version, fitted with 2 Junkers Jumo 004B turbojet engines, the same power plants used in the ME-262. The aircraft was a striking sight. Its wingspan stretched over 50 feet, swept back at a sharp 32-degree angle. The pilot sat in a small cockpit at the center of the wing, surrounded by fuel tanks. There was no vertical tail, no horizontal stabilizer. Just the wing itself, curving gracefully to pointed tips. On February 2, 1945, test pilot Lieutenant Erwin Ziller took the H9V2 into the sky over Oranienburg. The Horten brothers were not present. They had been reassigned to work on an even more ambitious project. Their entry into the America Bomber competition, a flying wing design theoretically capable of striking the east coast of the United States. That project never advanced beyond sketches and calculations. Their jet fighter was left in the hands of the Gothaer Wagon Fabric Company, which had been contracted to prepare it for mass production. Ziller's first flight was a success. The aircraft reached speeds that witnesses on the ground clocked at nearly 800 kilometers per hour. It handled smoothly, responding well to control inputs. A second flight followed, though it ended with a hard landing that damaged the undercarriage. According to some accounts, during one of these test flights, the H9V2 engaged in a mock dogfight with a Messerschmitt Me-262 and outmaneuvered it. The Luftwaffe's jet fighter, the most advanced combat aircraft in the world at that moment, had met its match. Then came February 18, 1945. The weather was overcast, with a low cloud base hanging over the airfield. Ziller climbed into the cockpit and took off for the third test flight. He disappeared into the clouds, where ground observers tracked his speed with theodolites. After about 45 minutes of testing, Ziller emerged from the cloud layer. Something was wrong. One of his engines had failed. What happened next remains a matter of debate. Witnesses saw Ziller attempt several shallow dives, apparently trying to restart the dead engine. The aircraft began making wide, spiraling turns with its landing gear extended. It is possible that fumes from the burning engine entered the cockpit and rendered Ziller unconscious. It is also possible that the flying wing's inherent instability became unmanageable with only one engine running. Walter Horten later suspected sabotage, though no evidence was ever found. The H9V2 crashed just beyond the boundary of the airfield. Ziller was thrown from the wreckage on impact. He died from his injuries 2 weeks later. The only powered Horten jet to ever fly was destroyed. For the Horten brothers, it was a devastating blow. But the German war machine pressed on. Production of a third prototype, the H9V3, was already underway at the Gothaer Wagon Fabric factory in Friedrichroda. The company's engineers had made significant modifications to the design, including a heavier nose wheel and revised engine intakes. The V3 was to be the template for 20 pre-production aircraft. It was to be armed with 2 30mm cannons. If the war lasted long enough, it might lead the way to a new generation of German fighters. The war did not last long enough. On April 14, 1945, elements of General George Patton's Third Army rolled into Friedrichsroda. American soldiers entered the Gothair factory and found a strange sight. The center section of the H-9V3 sat on its landing gear in a road maintenance building, its wing panels stored at a separate location nearby. Around it were the partially completed hulls of the V4, V5, and V6 prototypes. None had been finished. None would ever fly. The Americans knew they had found something extraordinary. Operation Paperclip was already underway, the massive Allied effort to capture German scientists, engineers, and advanced technology before the Soviets could reach them. The H-9V3 was tagged for shipment to the United States. Its center section and wings were loaded onto trucks and transported to Cherbourg, where they were loaded onto a ship bound for America. Meanwhile, the Horten brothers were taken to London for interrogation. British and American intelligence officers questioned them extensively about their designs and methods. What the brothers told them during these sessions would later become a source of controversy. Decades later, Reimar Horten claimed that he had always intended to make the flying wing a stealth aircraft, invisible to radar. He said he had planned to add a mixture of charcoal, sawdust, and glue between the layers of plywood skin to absorb radar waves. But in 1945 he mentioned nothing of the kind. Neither did Walter. The stealth claim would not emerge until 1983, almost 40 years after the war ended. After the interrogations, the brothers' paths diverged. Walter remained in Germany. He eventually joined the newly formed Bundesluftwaffe, the West German Air Force, and served as an officer until his death in 1998. Reimar's fate was different. He attempted to find work with British aerospace companies, but no offers materialized. He tried China. Again, nothing. Finally, he emigrated to Argentina, where the government of Juan Perón was actively recruiting German engineers and scientists. In Argentina, Reimar continued to design flying wings. His most notable project was the FMA IAE-38 Naranjero, a four-engine flying wing transport aircraft designed to carry oranges from rural producers to Buenos Aires. The name literally means orange carrier. It was not a success. Argentina lacked the industrial infrastructure and resources that Reimar needed to build truly advanced aircraft. He spent the rest of his life on a ranch in the foothills of the Andes, tinkering with gliders and dreaming of what might have been. He died in 1994, half a world away from the runways where his jet had briefly taken flight. Back in the United States, the H-9V3 prototype arrived at Freeman Field in Indiana, where American engineers studied it alongside dozens of other captured German aircraft. The evaluation teams were thorough. They photographed every component, measured every surface, documented every innovation. At one point, there is evidence that the engines were actually run. Burn marks found on wooden panels beneath the center section suggest that American engineers started the turbojets, perhaps in preparation for test flights that never occurred. The aircraft was briefly sent to RAF Farnborough in Britain, where engineers considered installing British jet engines, but the larger diameter of British turbojets made them incompatible with the Horten's design. The plan was abandoned. The H-9V3 was shipped back to America and transferred to the Smithsonian Institution around 1952. And there it sat. For decades, the world's first jet-powered flying wing moldered in storage, much of that time outdoors under a makeshift awning at the Smithsonian's storage facility in Silver Hill, Maryland. The layered plywood skin began to separate. Paint flaked away. Metal components rusted. By the time serious restoration work began, the aircraft was in poor condition, a ghost of the revolutionary machine it had once been. Then came 1983, and Reimar Horten's extraordinary claim. In a book titled Nurflugel, or Only the Wing, Reimar wrote that he had always intended the Ho 229 to be a stealth aircraft. He claimed he had planned to sandwich a mixture of charcoal and glue between the wooden layers of the skin to absorb radar waves. The charcoal, he said, would make the whole airplane invisible to radar. It was a remarkable assertion. If true, it would mean the Nazis had invented stealth technology 3 decades before the Americans developed the F-117. The claim ignited a firestorm of speculation. Aviation enthusiasts noted the similarities between the Ho 229's shape and the later B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, also a flying wing design. The idea that Hitler had possessed a radar-invisible wonder weapon, kept hidden all these years, captured the public imagination. In 2009, the National Geographic Channel partnered with Northrop Grumman, builder of the B-2, to investigate. Northrop's engineers spent approximately 2,500 man-hours and $250,000 constructing a full-scale wooden replica of the Ho 229 for radar testing. They mounted it on a 15-meter pole at a radar test range in the Mojave Desert and bombarded it with electromagnetic energy from various angles, simulating the British chain-home radar network that had defended England during the war. The results were decidedly mixed. The replica did show a reduced radar cross-section compared to a conventional fighter like the Bf-109. The flying wing shape, with its lack of vertical tail surfaces and smooth contours, naturally deflected some radar waves. Northrop estimated that the Ho 229 would have been detected at a distance about 80% that of a standard German fighter. Not invisible, not even close, but perhaps a meaningful advantage in certain tactical situations. There was, however, a significant problem with the test. Northrop's replica was made almost entirely of wood. The real Ho 229 had an 11-foot wide center section constructed of welded steel tubing. It had 2 Junkers turbojet engines, each made of metal and producing significant radar reflections. It had 8 large aluminum fuel tanks. It was designed to carry external munitions. The Northrop replica included none of these things. Critics pointed out that testing a simplified wooden mock-up told us very little about how the actual aircraft would have appeared on radar. Meanwhile, Smithsonian conservators were conducting their own investigation. They examined samples of the H-9V3's plywood skin using digital microscopy, X-ray diffraction, and Fourier transfer spectroscopy. They were looking for the charcoal that Reimar had claimed was embedded in the glue. Their findings were inconclusive. Some tests suggested the possible presence of carbon particles. Others did not. The consensus among researchers was that while the results were somewhat ambiguous, they fell on the side of there being no intentional stealth treatment. Russell Lee, the Smithsonian curator who literally wrote the book on the Horten brothers, pointed out several reasons to doubt Reimar's claims. Neither brother mentioned anything about radar absorption to Allied intelligence officers after the war. An odd omission if they had truly pioneered stealth technology. The first written mention of the charcoal mixture did not appear until 1983, the same year details of American stealth aircraft were becoming public knowledge. And, perhaps most tellingly, if the Ho 229 was as fast as Reimar claimed, why would it need to evade radar? It could simply outrun any Allied fighter. The truth appears to be more mundane, but no less interesting. The Horten brothers designed the Ho 229 for speed and range, not stealth. The flying wing shape was chosen for its aerodynamic efficiency, not its radar characteristics. Any reduction in radar signature was a happy accident, not a deliberate design goal. Reimar's later claims may have been an elderly man embellishing his legacy in light of new developments in aviation technology, or perhaps he genuinely believed, in hindsight, that stealth had been his intention all along. Memory is a tricky thing, especially after 4 decades. Today, the H-9V3 sits on display at the Smithsonian's Stephen F. Udvar Hazy Center in Chantilly, Virginia, adjacent to Dulles International Airport. It is displayed in a partially restored state, the center section and wings shown separately. The conservation work, which took years to complete, stabilized the deteriorating structure but deliberately preserved its weathered appearance. Visitors can see the rust, the flaking paint, the evidence of decades of neglect. It looks exactly like what it is, a relic of a world gone mad, pulled from the ashes of a destroyed nation and carried across an ocean to be studied by its enemies. Near it hang other artifacts of German aviation ambition. The Arado AR-234, the world's first jet bomber. A Messerschmitt Me-163 Comet, the rocket-powered interceptor. But none captures the imagination quite like the Horten. Its bat-like silhouette, its swept-back wings, its alien geometry. It looks like it belongs in a science fiction film, not in a museum of World War II history. In a sense, it did appear in a science fiction film. The enormous flying wing aircraft that carries the villain in Captain America. The first Avenger bears a striking resemblance to the Horten designs. The movie's production designers drew directly on the Ho 229 and the unbuilt H-18 America bomber for inspiration. Hollywood recognized what the Smithsonian curators have long known. These aircraft were genuinely ahead of their time. The legacy of the Horten brothers extends beyond museums and movies. Their work influenced the development of flying wing aircraft around the world. Jack Northrop, the American pioneer of tailless designs, was aware of their experiments before the war and studied captured German data afterward. His XB-35 and YB-49 flying wing bombers, developed in the late 1940s, owed something to the knowledge captured from Germany. The B-2 Spirit, which entered service in 1997, represents the ultimate refinement of the flying wing concept. It is stealthy, but its stealth comes from advanced composite materials and computer-controlled surfaces, not from charcoal mixed with glue. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about the Horten Ho 229 is not what it was, but what it could have been if the war had lasted another year, if Ziller's engine had not failed, if the resources devoted to other wonder weapons had been directed toward the flying wing. The Third Reich might have produced dozens or even hundreds of these aircraft. They would not have been invisible. They would not have won the war. By 1945, Germany was out of fuel, out of trained pilots, out of time, but they would have been a formidable threat, capable of speeds that no Allied fighter could match. Instead, the program died with Erwin Ziller in a frozen field outside Oranienburg. Its only surviving prototype crossed an ocean to sit in storage for 6 decades. Its designers scattered to Argentina and the new German Air Force. Its secrets, such as they were, became fodder for documentaries and conspiracy theories. The Horten Ho 229 was not Hitler's invisible wonder weapon. It was something both more modest and more impressive, a genuine technological breakthrough, born from the obsession of 2 self-taught brothers, cut short by war's end and fate's cruelty. Today it rests in silence beside other relics of that terrible conflict, a reminder of how quickly even the most advanced machines can become museum pieces and how the story we tell about them can change with every passing decade. For 80 years, this aircraft has kept its secrets, and perhaps that is fitting. In the end, the greatest mystery of the Ho 229 is not whether it could evade radar, but what might have happened if history had given it the chance to fly. Thanks for watching. If you found this video fascinating, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for more History Inside.